Welcome to Soundbreaker. In today's episode, we're talking to Tristra Yeager, who is a Chief Strategy Officer at Rock, Paper, Scissors. Tristra, thank you for joining us today. For our listeners who might not be familiar with you, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I am Tristra Yeager, and as she said, I am Chief Strategy Officer at Rock, Paper, Scissors, which is a music innovation PR firm. Very, that's a long string, but we are also the folks behind the Music Tectonics Conference and the Music Tectonics podcast. So it's fun to be in the other seat this time. Usually,
Absolutely.
I get to boss the guests around, but now I get to just lean back and enjoy.
Tristra, can you please take us back to your early days, teenage, and really how did you, or what influenced you actually to lead you to take that path into PR, marketing, and into the music world? Were you influenced by somebody from the family, parents, or something that you really just kind of developed on your own and you said, hey, this is the path I want to take and pursue?
I think, like a lot of people in music, music was always a protective sanctuary for me as a child. I loved it. I loved it both sort of technically, like I loved the way music happened and figuring out how to play things. I got a lot of piano lessons and that kind of stuff, and I sang in the church choir. But then I just became absolutely obsessed with music and really interested in the folks behind it. My first job was at a record store, later became a really just absolutely obsessive singer, was in a bunch of different projects as a young person, even worked professionally for a while, managed to support myself for, well, when you're young, supporting yourself is a little simpler, but so the just my absolute love of music, and that has stuck with me today. And what I love about our industry is that that sort of thread ties everybody together, because even if we don't agree about the music we like or how we should go about running our business or what, any of those things, we can still agree on that sort of central passion that's determined our lives. So that's what's kept me here, and that's what brought me here.
I mean, you're definitely a tool that every artist in the music business need, and I wish more artists take on the role of getting involved.
Mm,
Taking an active role in doing PR for their music. It would help a lot.
yeah.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
great talent out there, and some of them, hey, I mean, I totally understand some of these artists might not be able to afford such things, but it's really very important for them to do such things.
I agree, and I
Yes.
wanted to just add, sorry, Bob, to step on you there, but I think
No, please.
there's a lot of merit in trying to do some of your own PR early on. And maybe you bring in some extra help, maybe someone to help you write about yourself, because writing about yourself is really difficult. I even struggle with that myself in my creative work. And maybe bringing someone in to help you do a little bit of the outreach if you have the budget for that. Like if you have someone who can just help you a couple hours a week, make sure you get some emails out there, make sure you follow up, do some research into outlets. It's really not that hard. And the cool thing is, most of the best journalists out there want to find out about new artists. They really desperately want to find new music. And that it can feel really daunting seeing the same people get covered over and over again. But you can start somewhere. And even if that's just doing regional or local press in your market, it's really valuable, and it's also just great practice for how to conduct yourself, how to build a sustainable business, professional skills, those kind of things. So it can be a really important part of an artist's life, even if they aren't hiring someone from the outside to do it all themselves.
Amazing. How did your early role at the World Music Institute shape your journey into PR and writing?
So I was always obsessed with music from all over the world. And at the time, people referred to, they threw everything into sort of this world music bucket that didn't quite fit into the established, traditional genres, most of which in the States are English speaking. So I was obsessed with like music from all over, listened as widely as I could. And when I heard there was a job available at a place where I could support this, basically people coming to the US to give concerts, I was totally psyched. So this was in New York City, and it was a nonprofit. So I just learned a lot about the nitty gritty of how people produce shows, especially in a crazy market like New York, how you promote them, how you do PR, and learned a lot from the people around me who were more experienced. And some of them are still, friends today. Fortunately, it was a really formative time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Um, Tristra, what were the stand-up moments, challenges during your time as op-ed page editor at Moscow Times?
Well, that's like, going deep into what makes Russia complicated. But so I
We,
was
we didn't we didn't do political things here. We
no,
stay
no, this
out of
isn't
it. Yes,
political at all. This is Russia was a big part of my life as a young person. Just
yes,
culturally, I live there, speak the language fluently, and so it's anyway. The I stumbled into this job. I sort of you're going to hear a lot of like stumbling around. So not everyone. Just for those of you out there that are still trying to find your groove, sometimes your groove kind of finds you, and you drift around and do all sorts of nutty stuff that all starts to
correct.
come
Yeah,
together.
absolutely.
So the op-ed, I edited the op-ed page, the opinion page at the Moscow Times, which was one of the biggest daily newspapers in terms of circulation at the time in Moscow, and it's in English. So we
Hmm.
had a lot of our contributors who would prefer to submit their opinions and thought pieces in Russian, and so my job was both to kind of solicit those pieces and edit them, and then also to translate them into English. So that was a really interesting, challenging job, and it got me pretty it was like a boot camp in terms of understanding the media in a very very interesting media market. But journalism internationally is quite similar. So I was working in like a bullpen style newsroom with like the news editor yelling across the room about this or that, or this is happening, and reporters running around. It was a really exciting environment. It was a really sometimes very exhausting environment, because you just had to stay till things were done, even if that was like 13 hours later. So but it was quite an adventure, and it really helped me sort of sympathize with what journalists go through and all they have to do in their work, and what they ask for. And so I had a really great mentor who was sort of the editor of the paper overall, and she was really great about sort of pointing out the details of like where journalism really has to be super thoughtful, ethical, reflective. Like it was a really great crash course in journalism, honestly. Maybe in like a somewhat unusual setting, but it was cool. It was like all my colleagues are from all over the world: Europe, UK, America, other parts of the world, and of course Russia and all over the former Soviet Union. So it was a wonderful experience, and also working with a pretty diverse environment, in a high stakes, kind of high pressure place. So very, very interesting.
I get it. The journey so far is pretty interesting, but now, how this whole thing took a 360 turn,
Yeah.
and you went to teaching courses on
Yeah.
history, Mongolia, and Russian
Yeah.
Mongol related people. Please.
So part of meanwhile, back in America, was working towards a PhD in history.
Yeah.
It was in area studies, but specifically I was focusing on the cultural history of Siberia and Mongolia. So, and at some point in every grad student's career, you usually end up teaching, which I really love. And so I got to design some courses that were specifically about the minority groups in Russia, and some in particular, and about the history and sort of the contemporary state and all that of minority politics at the time. So that was really, really, really interesting. I also taught a course on the Mongol Empire. So I got a bunch of students who were like deep into like this sort of LARPing D&D world, and like really wanted to understand sort of Mongol military strategy, which unfortunately they didn't have the best teacher for that.
Mm.
But as I was like, yeah, but Kublai with his religious policy, they're like, no, man, what were their shields like? So it was fun though. But yeah, I've always had this sort of weird tension between sort of the intellectual work and academia and research and sort of music and theater and entertainment and the businesses around those. And
Mhm.
they sort of converged with rock, paper, scissors. So all the stuff sounds like it was all over the place, but I swear there's like a big a big sort of ending coming up here.
Tristra, how has your background in PR and writing influenced your approach to blending genres in novels like The Tomb and the Stone and Starfall?
So my career, so I think a lot of folks that are in music are also creative in some other way. They may make music still, or they may
Yeah,
still have like be a touring musician or songwriter.
yeah.
Um, and for me, because of the structure of my life, it was easier to sort of focus on writing versus making music. Like, it was hard to get to rehearsals. It was hard to I'm a singer, so I'm really lazy. No, just kidding. But I'm not like, well, some singers do produce all their own music and write their own music, but that just wasn't my talent. And so I decided I wanted to write books, and sort of my work at Rock, Paper, Scissors has involved, speaking with hundreds of people from all over the world who were just wildly creative and each in their own way, and trying to this was back when we did music PR instead of music tech PR, but that whole experience just gave me so many stories and so many people to think about, and so many friendships that I never would have made anywhere else. And so I was really inspired by the creative people around me to be creative myself. So I drew on what I knew, which is history. So my dissertation was about some of the areas that appear in my first novel, which is The Tomb and the Stone. It's set in Siberia, and it's a sort of an early 19th century, like progressives in exile, kind of, but I tried to make it, just writing about really depressed people in Siberia isn't a very fun read. So I tried to make it a little bit fantastical and bring in some of the other elements that I'm interested in, like folklore from the area and
Mm,
history. And then my most recent novel is about where I live now, which is in Indiana, and it centers on a utopian community that was founded by an eccentric. Well, he's kind of like the 19th century equivalent of a mix of Bill Gates and Elon Musk. So his name's Robert Owen,
mm,
and he set up a town in the middle of nowhere and brought all sorts of artists and scientists and educators out there to sort of run an experiment and see if they could come up with the perfect society. This is not a spoiler alert, they failed. But a lot of interesting things came of that. And a lot of the people involved were super influential in early America in ways that people may not realize. So, um, anyway, novel writing, I mean, I think we all who are in who are music professionals, especially if you're in PR marketing, like, you have
yes.
to have a creative practice to supplement the hard work you're doing on behalf of others. And it's like a way to refill your own cup and constantly engage with the world and find new inspiration. So I've become a better writer by forcing myself to write, extensive books and getting to the end of a project, and it really helps me sympathize with the both sort of entrepreneurs and creators who
Hmm.
are trying to project manage and deal with life, and also sort of find the best possible iteration of their vision. I've found it really, it's also just so therapeutic. I mean, I don't know, Bob, what you
It
do
is.
to restore yourself, but even if you just make it for yourself, it's like one of the best ways to just sort of set stuff aside and find a whole other dimension to life. So for lack, I don't want to get too woo, but
No. Can you tell us about some of the key projects that you
Mm.
led during your time as as a chief strategy officer at Rock Paper Scissors?
Yeah, I have. I feel like I've been one of the main people I'm one of the longest standing employees at Rock Paper Scissors. We've been around for over 20 years, and
Hmm.
um, it's been a real journey to sort of, what we did as a company, and maybe some other folks out there will find this valuable, is we pivoted from just doing sort of artist festival label PR, specifically for international non-commercial artists, and then, we're talking like Ladysmith Black Mambazo and Balkan artists and things like that, and we moved into representing companies and startups, and that has been a really eye-opening experience. And so I have been part of this transition in a way that I think has been pretty important to the company, in that I'm pretty much up for anything. And my very diverse background that we just went through, that sounds a little bit crazy, has actually given me a lot of skills and ways of approaching a problem. And, you know, in grad school, if you do it right, you learn how to learn and you learn how to research. And that's, you know, we don't talk about that a lot in the music industry, but it's really important. Our industry is complex. It's affected by all of these things that have nothing to do with music, whether it's like how the Congress is feeling today, to, you know, and like the you know, Librarian of Congress, or like
Yes.
how, you know, what some guy in Silicon Valley thinks is cool when he just, you know, invented this new platform that does all this stuff that we may or may not care for. You know, there's always something new to learn, and there's a really important role for research. And PR is often seen as this kind of like spin machine, like, all right, kid, you know, I'm gonna get you on, you know, like, it is, and it is about relationships. It is about like, you know, I know this person and I think that this person should talk to you. But it's also about like, I know quite a bit about your business and I understand what you're struggling with so that you can explain it to me and I can help you formulate it in a way that is accessible, compelling, exciting. But that takes a lot of research. You have to have a lot of background, about a lot of things. You may not be an expert in anything, but you do need to know a lot about a lot of things.
Mhm.
And that has been, one of the roles I think I've played, and it's also like the most fun part. I love learning about new things, new people, new approaches, new ideas. It's just, it's like pure pleasure for me. So, um, and yeah, and our clients are always bringing new stuff to the table. So it's never a dull moment.
Amazing. How can you blend the diverse culture stories into PR plans, you know, across
Oh
different
yeah.
industries?
Yeah, I think that's a really, I love that question. It's, so we often think of PR, like I said, it's either this sort of spin machine or it
Yes.
has to be like a press release has like a dateline and
Yeah.
it has to have these words in it. It'll probably use the word leverage. Like, please don't use the word leverage unless you really have to. I've got some like words that I'm no longer friends with. So but that's just me. So in PR, you're basically talking to other humans, right? So
Yes.
how you do that, and sometimes we put on a show for other humans. We're like, I am a big important business leader and I have this very business leadery way of talking, and I had to like get my, you know, shareholders and my investors and everyone to feel that vibe. But mostly what we're doing is we're talking to people, we're telling stories. And I,
Yes.
you know, and what I mean by stories is we're trying to communicate something we think is really important about the world, and to provide enough context for our, the person listening to us or conversing with us, to come with us into our enthusiasm and, really get caught up in our feelings. So it's not just like the hero's journey or like laying out a narrative arc. It is really thinking deeply about, what you feel as well as what you think. And also what has come before you, and being really serious about, I can't go on and just like hype myself through this, right? Like I can't go and say, oh, this is the best, or we're the first, or you're probably not. And even if you are, it probably isn't what's going to get a journalist in particular excited, because they hear that every day. They see the
Hmm.
thousands of bests and firsts in their inboxes. So the cultural stories come in because that's where you can help find the hooks that
Yes.
will get that human interest sort of going, and
Hmm.
pique the curiosity of the journalist you're pitching, for example, because journalists are deeply curious people. That's why they do their jobs, and that's what is so wonderful about them. And sometimes what is a little bit daunting, because sometimes they get curious about stuff you wish they wouldn't ask about. um, but that's fun too. You learn to sort of do this dance where you're giving them, enough information, and it's colorful and it's vibrant and it has life to it, as opposed to just cliches. Or, you know, that's why chat gpt can be, kind of an obstacle to your thinking,
Hmm.
at certain stages, in that if you churn out very boring prose, you kind of make your ideas as bland as what you say.
Hmm.
So like style and substance kind of have to work together in that way. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit off topic, but, the cultural stories give you that substance that you need, because anybody can do style. A machine can do style now. You
Yeah.
need the substance and the ideas and the thought part and the human connection part are really the art of this trade. So
Well, I mean, that would lead to my next question. Is pretty much as you see the huge, how should I say, transition now in the music
mm,
business into the
hmm
tech world, and it's
hmm
called no longer it's called music business, it's called music tech now.
yeah,
And how does that kind of, you know, come into your business? And as you see now, an influx of all type of AI tools out
oh
there,
yeah,
promotion AI tools, that
hmm
marketing tools AI, it's all based, a lot of subscription
absolutely,
platforms coming up. Yeah, and it's like, hey, is that kind of, how do you see that coming into your, I'm not saying it's going to replace, but how do
yeah,
you see this kind of wave of all new AI tools that really coming up for marketing and promotion, and by
mm,
subscription, that obviously being promoted to artists, like, hey, come in, you pay this much and you don't have to deal with anything. Your song get promoted by press a button, you pay a certain amount of
yeah.
money, a small fee. And how does that kind of influencing the marketing and PR business in general for independent artists, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak kind of generally to that, and I think there are great tools out there. I also think every artist or artist team needs to make the decision for themselves what they're trying to accomplish.
Hmm.
So I think sometimes we put the cart before the horse, and
Yeah.
because I mean, in some ways, we've been trained by a lot of technologists and investors, and to look at the tech first as a thing in and of itself, but it's merely the end, the means to an end, and we can get lost when it comes to what is our actual goal if we get too like worried about, oh, do I need to do this or that? It's like, you know, there have been artists who are better served by you know, playing live and having next to nothing about them online, right? Or only the bare minimum. There are artists who are super online and who are like killing it on TikTok and have, there are artists that built a whole career around live streaming and that had it, before the pandemic, were like making like a pretty decent middle class income, you
Hmm.
know, but from live streaming. And so there's so many different ways to approach this, and there's some experimentation, like you have to throw some spaghetti at the wall, but I always, in my own work, like as a creative person, and with anyone I talk to who wants my advice, is like always think there's two things you got to think about. One is you never want to spend more than you really should, right? Like so people get really wound up and just start throwing money at a problem, and that can be like really really disheartening.
Hmm.
So try to be super strategic about like how much you're going to spend on each experiment, and really think about it as an experiment and try to determine like how will I know if I've succeeded, how will I what is success to me, because for some of us it could be playing 5 shows that are sold out at like 100 cap room
Yeah.
and getting a bunch of new fans, and that's really what I need to be doing right now. And for some people it's getting a million streams on Spotify, like, but that might not work for a folk artist for per se. That might not be relevant to what they're trying to do anyway. So we always think first of like what you are trying to do and pick 1 or 2 things you need to accomplish next, versus like, oh yeah, and then I'll do merch and then I'll do this. Like don't think about the extended universe yet. Like dream about that, like have your fantasies and totally let that stuff percolate and have your like wild crazy ideas. But like you got to pick a goal to go for next. And sometimes it's like I like to think about it both for artists and for sort of thought leaders or execs who want to build their profile. I often like to think of concentric circles. So you start, and this is actually, I got this from our RPS founder and CEO, Dimitri Vitsa. You start at the core, like, you can reach these 50 people, right?
Yeah.
And then you think like, okay, so how could I reach 150? And you expand out. And sometimes that's a geographical set of circles.
Yes.
Sometimes that is about like types of audiences. So I know I can talk to like the MIDI the MIDI nerds who are like me, and then after that, can I talk to the producers and gearheads, and after that, could I talk to just sort of more amateur musicians who want to do something like what I'm proposing? So there's ways to like formulate this so you can really have a gradual stair step approach instead of being like, I have to get on the cover of the New York Times, which is like that's a terrifying goal. Like, how do you do that? Like, I mean, how do you do that within the boundaries of the law, right? Um,
Yes.
and you don't want overnight success in some ways. Like, this is a little bit counterintuitive, like, but you want to build up so that you have a foundation because you're gonna have.
Overnight success creates overnight failure. Sometimes you
Yeah,
feel
and
you
that
come
hurts.
down faster than the way
That
you went
hurts.
up.
That hurts so
Yes.
bad,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
can crush a person. Like, we're all
Absolutely.
quite delicate, physically and psychologically. We can't bear that kind of stress. So the more, and it also, if someone leaves you in the lurch, like there are partners who seem great and maybe they're great for a year, but then they turn out to be not so great. And you don't want to be left,
No.
with all this cool stuff half done, for example. So anyway, I want artists to really think about what success means to them and try to get themselves out of the rat race and allow the like, you should, you're an artist. Who knows what you should do? You do,
Do
right?
you think there's a big misconception of lack of knowledge and education into what marketing and PR and promotion all about in the
Mm.
artist side? Is this the misconception? That's why a lot of artists think, yeah, just put some Facebook ads and you'll be okay. You don't need
Yeah, I mean
anything else.
that could be true for some people. Or like there are people who go on TikTok and then they move, these hundreds of books. It's just wild. You can never quite tell what the world is going to do, right? So the world isn't up to you, and so you need to have a plan in place for yourself
Yes.
so that you can evaluate what is working and what isn't. And PR and marketing are kind of distinct. With PR, remember you've got a really specific audience, which is journalists, and so they're looking for very specific things. And once you figure that out, you can start to work with them pretty effectively, right? Because you can kind of know what it is gonna turn them on and push their buttons, and how to sort of A/B test whether your ideas are going to catch on or not. With
Hmm.
marketing, there's a lot more options, especially with music. You've got a lot of places you can go. But I really love the advice of kind of focusing on one platform at first and really mastering it, and never focus on the audience on that platform. Like when I see people pursuing like Instagram followers or whatever, that to me is like that's a fool's errand, right? You're building up a bunch of audience for Meta to advertise to. What you need those people to know who you are and to really follow you. You at the very least need their SMS number, their text number or their email, because things change and people's accounts get blocked, and there's lots of stories of people losing a huge audience overnight.
It's funny you mentioned that. Yes, it's funny you just mentioned that. I had an interview with somebody the other day, and we were talking about a lot of these data, a lot
Mm,
of these followers at whether it's TikTok or Meta, Instagram or
mhm,
Facebook or YouTube or Shorts, all of these platforms. They don't belong to the artist. The artist cannot connect
absolutely.
with these followers.
Mhm,
And if you want to call them super fans, whatever they are, if for any artist, they can only connect to them through that platform, and you could lose overnight. You could lose them,
mhm,
and you have no way of communicating with them, connected to them, tap into them. Hey, this is my next performance. The only way you do that through the platform. So there was a big like, how can we interact with these? Tell them about our next,
mhm.
concert or our new merch or our whatever.
Yeah,
New albums coming out only through the platform, and
yeah.
unfortunately, they could be gone in a heartbeat. Somebody hacked your account, something went wrong, you lost 100,000 followers or ten
Yeah.
thousand or a million. Doesn't whatever type of
Mhm.
artist you are, level that you're in,
And it's
and
just, I mean, with what's going on right now with AI and the algos,
yes,
it's a little bit nutty. So, for instance, this is from an example from a different branch of like the media and
yeah,
entertainment world. But if we look at things like product reviews, there were dedicated websites that had like research and labs, and they did all sorts of stuff to test products and
mhm.
make sure that they were giving the best possible information to consumers. And now they have been completely down, like they've been basically their SEO has plummeted, and on
Hmm.
top of it, basically is surfacing a bunch of what's often referred to as AI slop. So
Hmm.
completely generated reviews based on no experimentation or information or comparison, or maybe the
Hmm.
person's never even seen the thing they're reviewing. And that's just one example of how a technological shift at one major player, namely
Hmm.
Google, could completely transform a really viable business that people actually want. Like people want to know what air purifier to buy, right?
Hmm.
But
Yes.
they can't find the information because it's buried. That when an artist, and it's the same thing with music. Like there's so many artists that I absolutely adore, and I've actually gone and bought their album several times on Bandcamp just because I'm like, I still love this album. I really want it again. I wish I could buy it again, and so I do. But like, these people are hard to like. It's hard for me to find the people that transform my life that way with music. And once I do, like, I want to I want to know about them, right? I want to know how they're doing. I want to know if they have new music out. I don't know. I just want to. Sometimes I even, if they're, depending on how cool they are, I want to hear like, what are they thinking about? But that's not really required. But you know what I'm saying? It's. I don't want some change at Meta to keep me away from people like that, right? That I whose work I just absolutely adore.
Yeah.
Um, and but that can happen. And what I'm saying is it's not a market problem, right? In a way, or maybe it is a market problem, but it's not. There's a demand and there's a supply, and those people can't find each other. So it's like actually kind of a market failure when we have
Yes.
these technological glitches. I don't know. I haven't really thought that through, and economists are probably rolling their eyes. But you can let me know what I got wrong. But it's
No, I mean maybe that's the way they were set it up. So they don't want you to connect.
yeah,
They want you
yeah.
only, and that's why they have control of it. And that's why a lot
Mm.
of these major labels and artists and managers and PRs like, hey, how can we penetrate? How can we have these followers? There's no way. There's no way.
Yeah. 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 It's, and you look at platforms like Facebook, and I'm sorry for anyone from Facebook, but it's not a very pretty platform. It
Well,
doesn't
no, I
show
mean they build it
very
that
well.
way, and that's the way it's
Yeah.
built.
But it does it aesthetically. Like if you're a music artist or a visual artist, you look at something and you're like, that's kind of looks fugly, right? I want to have my work in a beautiful setting, and at least I find Bandcamp less aesthetically objectionable, and it feels like it really gives more of a you can really get the vibe of the artist or label a little bit better.
Hmm.
But that's the other thing is they're not built to showcase your strengths. A lot of these platforms, but anyway, that we're getting deep.
Hey, what advice you would give a music enthusiast and artist, and or I should say, tech music enthusiast
Mm.
that looking to explore different genres, to find their voice.
Oh wow, that is like really difficult. I mean, if are we so we're talking about from a music lovers perspective or a music makers perspective?
Makers, and
Okay.
and the side of both the makers and the people involved in
Mm.
helping the makers reach their goals, on both in the business side and the creative side.
That's a really, really good question. It's so the cool thing about music though is you do have quite a bit of usage data, right? You can
Hmm.
kind of see who you get a better idea, even if you don't have everyone's email address right off the bat. You do know
Hmm.
like people are listening a lot in Omaha, or I really have a lot of like the demographic. You can get a demographic breakdown with a pretty cheap tool, if not from the platform itself that you're looking at, and their artist tools. So there's a lot of information there, and I think the biggest problem is the cold start problem for a lot of artists, right? Like, so they don't even have enough activity to make that information valid or helpful.
Yeah.
And breaking through that is a really, really good question. And that is pretty much outside of my scope of work, what I do. Usually we have, we usually we would work with artists and we work with companies once they've
Yeah.
kind of gotten to a certain level. That we have worked with like really baby startups that are just launching. And in some ways it's investing in the very best presentation of yourself that you can possibly afford. So whether that is really getting the music right and making
Hmm.
sure you've got a recording that represents what you do, working on your live show, and then consistently doing a couple small things a day or a week to to try to build your audience. And so that may be, you know, regularly playing gigs, even if they're just local gigs. It could be, going on a radio show, could be hosting a radio show. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there as a curator or as an instigator, and not just as an artist or as
Hmm.
an influencer or whatever we're calling poor people that have to perform for social media nowadays. Um, there's really try. You got to try a lot of stuff, but you also need to sort of be fairly, like I said, strategic about spending money.
Yes.
So, at Rock Paper Scissors, we don't do a ton of work with artist development, etc. So this is all just based on my own observations and experience. So take it with a grain of salt. And anyone who's in music marketing who says I'm wrong, just reach out to me because I want to hear what you have to say. But I can say from a more of a music tech and B2B or like corporate PR perspective, really nailing what it is you want to say and really looking carefully at your differentiators, and being humble. So do the small interview. You maybe your biggest hit is going to be something that's more of like a B-level music trade.
Mm.
That's really valuable. Like just don't
Yes.
don't say no, um, at least to things like PR opportunities early on, because those do add up. And the problem with things like, sometimes people are like, oh, I don't want to be, we're sort of elite, we're hitting this. I was like, you're not at that stage yet. So be really humble and recognize where you are in your path, because you know, there are folks that can turn down interviews. Maybe you'll get there someday, but if
Yeah.
you're just getting started, don't do that. Right? Talk to everybody. And the intern you talk to, the editorial intern at that small blog could, or at that small outlet, or at a maybe at a big outlet, could eventually become a pretty notable journalist in their field. And you'll have that relationship from the get-go. So it's all about building relationships. And you can only do that by interacting with people.
Hmm. You are a queen of PR at Rock, Paper, and Scissors.
I don't know. I don't know if that's a crowd I want to take. I might avoid that throne, but that's kind of you.
Anything to look for our viewers and your
Mm.
fans and our fans and followers and listeners at Soundbreaker. Anything new that Rock, Paper, and Scissors or yourself to look for this summer or later on this year? New
Yeah.
project or new function or new
Yeah. No,
product?
we've got a couple new developments. We have started to work with all sorts of experts and sort of bring marketing, SEO, influencer work, and PR together in a really substantial way. So
Hmm.
um, we've dabbled in some of those fields, but we've really leaned in hard and brought on some people who are excellent at their jobs. And
Hmm.
so we find that really exciting because marketing PR is kind of like chocolate and peanut butter. They're kind of separate, but they go really well together, and they can harmonize really, really well, even though they have slightly different functions. Um,
Amazing.
so that we've got that on the RPS side, and Music Tectonics is always doing crazy new stuff. So late October in Santa Monica, we'll have I think is it our fifth edition of Music Tectonics, with a lot of everybody's like favorites and the greatest hits, but we're expanding some of our offerings into the more of the creator space. So there should be a whole bunch of new faces and experiences, and
Mhm.
we're really like the vision that's coming from Dimitri Vitsa, our CEO and kind of mastermind, is something that's been pointed out by a lot of people in the field. So like Mark Mulligan has a lot about this. A lot of people are talking about this. We're going to have a bunch of creators who don't really fit into the boxes of the commercial music industry. So these may be people who love making music or who make music as part of another media experience, but they're not really thinking about like the traditional commercial release pipeline, at least not initially.
Mhm.
So we really want to bring to light some of the tools and companies and people who are spearheading that movement, because we almost have this moment of parallel tracks or bifurcation or alternate universes. I don't know, but they need to overlap. Like we have the
Yes.
traditional industry needs to talk to the creators and vice versa, because there's a lot to share and a lot of good could come from us working together. So that's our hope with this upcoming Music Tectonics. And if you want to find out more, it's at musictectonics.com. And yeah, so those, I mean, that's like more good new stuff for any any
Well,
agency to be working on, but it's very
yes.
exciting.
We'll make sure our listeners and viewers to be on the lookout for it.
Yeah, come join us.
I want to thank Tristra from Rock, Paper, and Scissors for joining us today and give us an extremely insightful, informative information about the world of PR and promotion and marketing. This concludes today's episode of Soundbreaker. Please make sure to follow us on socials. Stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you and see you. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share the Soundbreaker podcast. And if you are joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.